The first race of the Formula One season was supposed to give us answers. Instead, it may have exposed one of the biggest controversies of the year. Because right after the Australian Grand Prix in Melbourne, something inside the paddock suddenly did not add up. McLaren engineers were staring at the data from the race, and what they saw made them furious. Same Mercedes engine. Same regulations. Same championship. Yet the Mercedes factory team appeared to unlock performance that McLaren simply could not access. And when the telemetry from the long straights in Australia was analyzed, one number started spreading quietly through the garages. 0.3 of a second. That is the estimated advantage Mercedes may be extracting from the exact same power unit their customer teams are using. 0.3 is not a small gap in Formula One. 0.3 can decide pole position. 0.3 can decide victories. 0.3 can decide championships. Which is why, only hours after the first race of the season ended, McLaren began asking a question that instantly raised tension inside the paddock. Is Mercedes hiding critical engine data from their own customer teams? And what makes this story even more explosive is what engineers discovered after the next race in China. But before we uncover what really triggered McLaren's anger after Melbourne, and why the Chinese Grand Prix only made the mystery deeper, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Because this story might reveal something that could change the entire Formula One season. What made the situation explode after Melbourne was not just the lap times. It was the data hiding behind those lap times. Because the moment the Australian Grand Prix ended, engineers inside McLaren began doing what every Formula One team does after a race weekend. They started dissecting everything. Every sector. Every corner exit. Every straight. Every trace of energy deployment from the Mercedes power unit. At first, the numbers looked normal. Competitive, yes, but not shocking. Mercedes had pace, but nothing that immediately suggested a hidden advantage. But the deeper they went into the telemetry, the more uncomfortable the picture became. One pattern kept repeating itself. Every time the Mercedes factory car accelerated out of slow corners, the energy deployment looked incredibly stable. The power arrived smoothly, the acceleration remained consistent, and the electrical boost seemed to last longer than expected. That alone was enough to catch the attention of engineers. But the real surprise appeared when McLaren compared those patterns with their own data. Because their car, running the exact same Mercedes power unit, did not behave the same way. The electrical deployment dropped earlier. The energy curve looked less stable. And the boost seemed to fade sooner on long straights. Now, for fans watching on television, this difference would be impossible to see. But for engineers studying telemetry graphs, it was obvious. Something about the way Mercedes was managing the hybrid system looked more refined. And that is when frustration started to grow inside the McLaren garage. Because in modern Formula One, the power unit is not just about horsepower. The internal combustion engine is only one piece of the puzzle. The real performance often comes from how the hybrid system is controlled. Energy harvested under braking. Energy stored in the battery. Energy deployed at exactly the right moment across the lap. Every decision is controlled by extremely complex software strategies. And mastering those strategies can unlock huge performance. If the electrical deployment lasts slightly longer on the straights, the car reaches a higher top speed. If the energy recovery is more efficient under braking, the battery stays fuller. If the timing is perfectly optimized, the driver receives maximum boost exactly when it matters. Corner exit. Mid-straight acceleration. The final meters before braking. Tiny gains. But gains that add up across an entire lap. And according to estimates circulating inside the paddock after Melbourne, those tiny gains might be worth around 0.3 of a second. That number immediately raised eyebrows. Because 0.3 in Formula One is enormous. 0.3 can move a car from the middle of the grid to the front rows. 0.3 can turn a strong weekend into a dominant one. And when customer teams see the factory team extracting that kind of advantage from the same engine, questions start appearing very quickly. Andrea Stella addressed the situation carefully after the race. He did not accuse Mercedes directly. But his comments revealed something important. McLaren, according to Stella, does not always have complete clarity about how the power unit behaves in every situation. Which means they often have to discover its limits through experimentation. Run the car. Collect the data. Analyze the behavior. Adjust the strategy. Try again. In other words, they are reacting. Mercedes, on the other hand, appears to operate with a level of certainty that suggests they already know exactly how the system will behave. And that difference between reacting and predicting can be worth a huge amount of performance. But the story became even more intriguing when another Mercedes customer team started saying something very similar. Williams. James Vowles revealed that only during qualifying in Australia did they fully realize how much performance the Mercedes factory team had available. Until that moment, the true potential of the power unit had not been obvious. Which created another uncomfortable question. If the engine is identical, how can the performance ceiling be so different? Inside the paddock, one explanation quickly gained traction. Mercedes might not be hiding the engine itself, but they might be operating with a deeper level of knowledge about how to unlock its full performance. And in a sport where knowledge is everything, that difference can be just as powerful as any mechanical upgrade. But the real turning point for this story was still coming. Because after Melbourne, the championship immediately moved to a completely different challenge. The Chinese Grand Prix. A track that exposes power unit efficiency more than almost any other circuit on the calendar. And what engineers discovered there made the entire situation even more intense. When the Formula One circus arrived in China, the mood inside several garages had already changed. Australia had raised the first questions. Shanghai was about to test them. Because the Chinese Grand Prix is one of the most revealing circuits on the entire calendar when it comes to engine behavior. Long straights, heavy braking zones, massive opportunities for energy recovery, and one of the longest full throttle sections in Formula One. If there was anything unusual happening with the Mercedes power unit, China would expose it. And that is exactly why engineers from multiple teams were watching the telemetry more closely than ever. Not the lap times, the energy traces, the acceleration curves, the exact moment when the electrical boost started, and when it faded. Because those details tell a much deeper story than the stopwatch. From the very first sessions in Shanghai, analysts began noticing something that looked strangely familiar. When the Mercedes factory car exited the final corner and accelerated onto the enormous main straight, the power delivery looked incredibly smooth. No sudden drops. No irregular spikes. Just a clean, consistent surge of hybrid power pushing the car all the way toward turn 1. At first, that might sound normal. But when engineers compared those traces with the data from customer teams running the same engine, the difference became clearer. The electrical deployment in the Mercedes car seemed to last slightly longer. Just a few moments more. But in Formula One, a few moments is everything. Because when the hybrid boost lasts longer, the car continues accelerating while others begin to lose electrical assistance. The result is a higher top speed, a stronger attack at the end of the straight, and a measurable advantage that slowly builds across the entire lap. What made this pattern even more interesting was its consistency. The same smooth deployment had already appeared in Melbourne. Now it was appearing again in Shanghai. Two completely different circuits. Two completely different energy demands. Yet the same signature behavior. And that is when several engineers started thinking about a possibility that goes far beyond raw engine power. Maybe this advantage is not coming from the engine itself. Maybe it is coming from how the hybrid system is being orchestrated. Think of the modern Formula One power unit like a massive orchestra of energy. The combustion engine produces power. The turbo generates additional energy. The recovery systems harvest energy under braking and from exhaust flow. The battery stores that energy. And then software decides exactly when it should be released. If every part of that orchestra plays at the perfect moment, the result is extraordinary efficiency. The driver feels constant acceleration. The battery remains balanced across the lap. And the car extracts maximum performance from every straight. But achieving that level of synchronization requires something incredibly valuable. Knowledge. Deep knowledge of how every element of the power unit behaves under pressure. Mercedes has something no other team has. They built the engine. They designed the architecture. They wrote the software controlling the energy systems. They spent years testing every scenario long before the season began. Customer teams receive the engine. They receive technical guidance. But they do not possess the same internal development history. And that difference can quietly shape the entire championship. Because while McLaren and Williams are still learning the behavior of the power unit across different circuits, Mercedes may already understand its full potential. And every race weekend gives them more opportunities to refine that advantage. That is the uncomfortable reality many teams began to recognize after China. This might not be about hidden hardware. It might not even be about withheld information. It might simply be about who truly understands the machine they are driving. But inside Formula One, perception matters almost as much as reality. And when customer teams start believing they are missing critical knowledge, tension begins to rise. Because no team wants to feel like they are competing with incomplete information. Especially when championships can be decided by fractions of a second. Now the entire paddock is watching closely. Every race. Every telemetry trace. Every energy deployment pattern. Because if Mercedes continues to extract the same advantage across multiple circuits, the question will only grow louder. Is this simply superior engineering? Or is there still something about that power unit strategy that the rest of the grid has not yet discovered? But the real reason this situation became so explosive inside the paddock was not just the performance gap. It was the silence around it. Because after Australia, and even after China, there was no official complaint. No formal protest. No public confrontation between teams. Instead, what started spreading through the garages was something much more dangerous. Suspicion. In Formula One, relationships between engine manufacturers and customer teams are built on trust. When a team buys a power unit, they are not just buying hardware. They are buying collaboration, technical support, and the confidence that they have the same opportunity to extract performance as the factory team. That balance has always been delicate. Manufacturers naturally keep certain internal knowledge within their own operations. But customer teams expect enough transparency to ensure that the playing field remains fair. And this is where the tension around Mercedes began to grow. Because from McLaren's perspective, the issue is not necessarily that Mercedes has a faster engine. The issue is understanding how that performance is being unlocked. Andrea Stella made it clear that McLaren sometimes feels they are learning about the engine in real time. They run simulations, they test deployment strategies, they analyze race data, but the behavior of the power unit can still reveal surprises during a race weekend. Surprises that the factory team does not appear to experience. That difference creates a frustrating dynamic. Imagine trying to solve a puzzle where another competitor already knows what the final image looks like. Every race becomes an experiment. Every practice session becomes another attempt to understand a system that might already be fully mapped inside the Mercedes factory. And in a championship that moves from continent to continent every single week, time is the most valuable currency of all. Because while customer teams are still decoding the engine's behavior, Mercedes continues refining their advantage. Another race. Another dataset. Another opportunity to improve their hybrid deployment strategy. Now consider the timing of all this. The season has only just begun. Australia was the first chapter. China immediately followed. And already, teams are realizing that the learning curve for this power unit might be much steeper than expected. Which leads to an uncomfortable possibility that several engineers have quietly discussed. What if Mercedes entered the season already months ahead in understanding how this engine behaves under race conditions? That kind of advantage would not look dramatic on television. There would be no obvious secret device. No visible innovation. Just slightly better acceleration. Slightly stronger deployment.